Warning: this video contains sensitive topics such as discussion of weight, menstrual cycles, hospital visits, and heavy bleeding. This video is atypical of the content we usually produce. If any of these subjects bother you, please feel free to skip this video and check out one of our gaming videos instead. Hello everyone, my name is Kage, and I'm one of the members of Revolutionary Productions. If you're not one of our subscribers and weren't brought here by our gaming content, then you've probably found this video because you're experiencing something very similar to what I went through last year, which I can personally attest to the fact that it's very, very scary. I just want to start this video out by explaining that I hit puberty very early. I was 9 years old, and that kind of thing is terrifying for a girl that young. I've always had heavy periods, terrible cramps, migraines, and fatigue. I was prescribed medicine for migraines in my teens, but I wasn't diagnosed with PCOS until my early 20s. Now, PCOS, or polycystic ovarian syndrome, is exactly what it sounds like. My body produces cysts on my enlarged ovaries, though they're usually pretty small and non-life-threatening. But I also have an imbalance of hormones where I produce more testosterone than I do estrogen, so I get facial hair, my arm and leg hair are dark and thick, I have trouble losing weight. Surprisingly, a lot more women have this than you think. Aside from being advised to watch my weight and to take Midol for my cramps, there was no discussion of pain management for periods where the cramps would get so bad that I would cry or vomit, sometimes both, from the pain. I was just told that it was normal and to suck it up. This made working during my period extremely difficult. I would be so sick and exhausted that half the time I couldn't get out of bed. Not only that, my periods were so irregular that I would end up not having one for 2 or 3 months, then suddenly get one that lasted 2 or 3 weeks. My job at the time didn't offer insurance, and when I got into voice acting, paid jobs were few and far between, and I didn't have any access to insurance. I went 9 years without any way to find out why I was in so much pain. Fast forward to my late 20s when I moved in with my husband, then boyfriend. We rushed the engagement and wedding stuff, mainly because he wanted to get me on his insurance. I had a lot of health issues piling up that hadn't been taken care of, including, but not limited to, blood pressure issues and carpal tunnel. And we really wanted to get me a general practitioner, which didn't take long to find. She wasn't the greatest, but that's another story entirely. I asked her to recommend me to a gynecologist, and she gave me a list of different places that took my insurance, and I started making calls. Now, one thing you have to understand was that this was right around the start of quarantine. Not a single gynecologist was taking new patients, and many of them were only doing televisits with their current ones. Meanwhile, I'm starting to see even worse period symptoms that had me scared shitless. One of the big things I'd find was that coinciding with the really bad tear and vomit-inducing cramps, I was passing these, well, what looked like giant blood clots. The first time it happened, I literally believed I had a miscarriage. It was that big. The problem I had was that I couldn't find a gyno, and I was terrified to go to the hospital because of COVID. Not only was I experiencing the blood clots, but I was having trouble just climbing the stairs, which at first we thought was COVID, because I'd get so winded just walking to my bathroom, but I tested negative. On top of this, I had no sex drive, and having sex was beginning to hurt. This was starting to affect my marriage at this point. 4 years after moving in with my husband, it started getting to where I'm having periods every 2 weeks that are so insanely bad that I'm bleeding through those giant overnight pads really quickly and through every pair of pants I own. But finally, we managed to find a gynecologist who's taking new patients. This whole debacle started in late March of 2023. I went in to see my new gyno. She's a really sweet lady who asked me a bunch of questions, including if my husband and I had consummated our marriage. Weird wording, suddenly it's the 1500s, but okay. I told her what I'd been experiencing, and she decided to put me on medroxyprogesterone. For those of you who don't know what that is, this is a medicine that when you start taking it, stops you from having a period, but the minute you stop, induces a period. I'm on this for around 16 days. At the end of that period, she wants me to start Slynd, which is a birth control. Now we're in April. I do what she tells me, and 3 days after I start the birth control, everything goes to hell. I'm on the 10th day of this period. I've had non-stop cramps for 3 days. I'm bleeding through overnight pads in half an hour. On the 3rd day of this, I decide something is seriously wrong. So I ask my husband to take me to the emergency room. I go in, they start checking me out, draw some blood, the whole 9 yards. Then they call my gyno, and together they decide to put me on some really strong pain meds for the night and to start me on another run of medroxyprogesterone. They also decide to give me an ultrasound just to make sure nothing is seriously wrong. While I'm waiting for the ultrasound, I head to the bathroom to change my pad for the 100th time, and by the time I get to the nurse's station, which is right next to the bathroom, I suddenly can't remember where I'm going. I stop, I look around, I catch the eyes of one of the nurses, and I open my mouth to ask for directions, and then the next thing I know, I'm on the floor. Apparently, my iron had dropped so low that I completely blacked out. They got me in a wheelchair, helped me to the bathroom, and then back to the room I was in, and decided to take some more blood, and they put me on prescription iron supplements for the next year. The ultrasound went fine, though it was the first time I'd had one, so it was a little embarrassing. They didn't see anything. We'll come back to that later. So they gave me the pain meds, a dose of the medroxyprogesterone, put in the 2 prescriptions, and by now it's been 3 hours. I'm starving and I'm tired, so Hannah takes me home. I start the medroxyprogesterone, and then I see my gyno for a follow-up about a week later. During that visit, she decides we're going to retrain my period, whatever that means. She wants me to take the medroxyprogesterone for 24 days, stop for 4 to induce a period, then go right back on it. I'm supposed to do this for the next few months until my sonogram that's scheduled for that August, and we'll reevaluate then. Alright, great. We have a plan. I can do that. Except that's not how things went. At first, the medroxyprogesterone worked just fine. I had a wonderful month of no cramps, no bleeding. Aside from the constant fatigue, which I was chalking up to the dangerously low iron, I was feeling myself again. Until it was time to go off the medicine for 4 days. At this point, we're in mid to late May. I stop taking the medicine, I have a period, I go back on it 4 days later, and the bleeding doesn't stop. The medicine just stopped working. Now, me trying to give it the benefit of the doubt, I just decide to wait a little while and see if there's maybe just so much backup from how heavy my periods get that it's going to take longer. Beginning of June, we go down to my parents for my nephew's elementary school graduation party, and I am miserable that entire weekend. Bleeding through pads in record time, cramps that make me feel like I'm going to be sick. I bled through 2 pairs of jeans, but I sucked it up until the party was over just to not ruin my nephew's day. It was just a weekend trip, so that Monday we head home. As soon as I get home, I call the gyno's office and we set up a televisit for the next day. I explain what I've been experiencing, and my doctor tells me that we're going to move up my sonogram to the next month and to up my dose of the medroxyprogesterone to, I think I was on 2 or 3 times a day at this point. That did nothing. The medicine was still not working. I make it to the sonogram, I go in, we do the thing, it's very uncomfortable and cold. Then they have me go into the exam room and take some blood and have me change for a pelvic exam. When the doctor comes in, we have an answer. It turned out that I had a very large cyst on my left ovary. Large as in, at the time they took it out, it weighed 8 ounces. Remember how they did an ultrasound at the hospital back in April? How the hell did they miss an 8-ounce cyst? The doctor tells me I'll probably need surgery. She sets me up with a specialist who isn't able to see me for an appointment until 3 weeks later. All the while, I'm still on the medroxyprogesterone, which isn't working. I'm still bleeding every day. By this point, it's been 2 months. 2 months of non-stop bleeding. The rest of the members of the channel can attest to how miserable I was. I put my D&D game on hold. The channel got put on hold. This is before we had started deciding to only cancel if more than 2 people were unavailable. I was in pain every day, and nothing I took did anything to help. There were days when I was just in so much pain, all I did was lay on the couch and cry. I was exhausted and dizzy from the cyst and the anemia. I couldn't stand up half the time without feeling like I was gonna pass out. Finally, I see the specialist, who tells me that my only real option is surgery. So he tells me he's going to schedule things with the hospital for a laparoscopic removal and a DNC. Now, laparoscopic surgery is just 3 tiny incisions, and they cut the thing off with, I think it's a laser? I'm not really sure. I was unconscious. A DNC is when they go in and they essentially scrape off your uterine lining. A lot of women get this done to help get pregnant. It took 3 weeks for them to get back to me with a surgery date. Now we're in July. They scheduled the surgery for September 8th, exactly a year ago today. In the meantime, I'm still bleeding and still on a medicine that is not working. I'm also going into my gyno every couple of weeks for blood work so that they can keep an eye on my iron levels. It's during one of these visits that my gyno decides to have me stop taking the medroxyprogesterone a few days before my surgery, and that she wants me to start something else 3 days after the surgery. The medicine is not working. Why do I have to stay on it until a few days before the surgery? Why can't I stop taking it now? At this point, I'm more than frustrated, but I agree. My mom came up to stay with me during the surgery just so that Hannah has an extra hand around the house. I go in for the surgery. I'm a little scared, but the nursing staff is great. The surgery goes great. They wheeled me into the room about 2:30 p.m. and I was heading home by 7. At this point, nobody's told me what they found, probably because they had to analyze it, whatever. My follow-up with the specialist is scheduled for 3 weeks later. It only took me a week to recover, really. I was back on my feet, even if I wasn't 100% by then. The DNC caused me to have a couple really bad days of just all those blood clots, which I learned were just chunks of uterine lining and stuff coming out. The bathroom looked like a murder scene. My mom was so amazing for helping get it all cleaned up. Then I started the new medicine, and a few days later that kicked in. Turns out, aside from the cyst, they found years of endometriosis buildup and had to clean all that out. They had no idea how I hadn't been diagnosed earlier. Probably because I didn't have insurance for 9 years. Endometriosis, as simply as I can put it, is when uterine lining grows on the outside of your uterus. It can attach to your other organs and cause a lot of pain and discomfort. In the end, my gyno decides to put me on Depo-Provera, which is a birth control injection I get every 3 months, and finally, I start to feel like myself again. There were some issues with the insurance after that, which didn't help my mental state, but that could be a whole video on its own, to be honest. Anyway, long story short, why am I making this video? Why am I talking about endometriosis and bleeding for 6 months and all that? Because I really, really hope that someone out there who sees this video finds some help from it. That they learn they're not alone and that there is an answer for what they're going through. It takes women an average of 8 years to be diagnosed with endometriosis. For me, it took nearly 15. All the while, they suffer painful periods and are told to suck it up and that what they're going through is normal. It is not normal. There's this whole stigma around women's bodies and women's pain that most doctors just believe, well, periods are painful. Yes, they can be, but not like this. This is torture. 10% of women have endometriosis. 10%. Women weren't formally included in research studies until the 1990s. There's still so much we don't know about women's bodies. Don't stop fighting with your doctors when they ignore your pain and your concerns. If you know there's something wrong, then you have to keep pushing them to try to find an answer. There is no cure for PCOS or endometriosis, at least not yet. But there are ways to help mitigate the pain and the other symptoms, which can include severe menstrual cramps that affect your quality of life, pain during menstruation, pain during intercourse, sacral or low back pain during menstruation, heavy bleeding, abdominal pain, abdominal bloating, vaginal or pelvic pain, infertility, fatigue, and/or urination urgency or frequency. These symptoms are the most common, but there are other symptoms as well. I am not usually one to get political, but that's why protecting women's rights is so important right now. Birth control isn't just about preventing pregnancy. For some women, it's the only thing keeping them from being in pain all the time, from being tired all the time. I've included links to organizations that are spreading awareness for both PCOS and endometriosis in the description of this video. Please help to spread awareness of these diseases. Now more than ever, women like me need support and need the world to know that these illnesses do exist. Thank you so much for watching this video and for letting me share my journey with you. See you next time. Mata ne!